Good morning, I'm Taylor Wilson, and today is Saturday, October 11th, 2025. This is USA Today's The Excerpt. Today, the latest from Gaza and Israel as we hear about one family's fight to return hostages. Plus, Trump follows through on threats to fire federal workers during the shutdown, and the latest on a manufacturing plant explosion in Tennessee. 7 Jewish members of Alana Zaitchik's family in Israel were abducted by Hamas on October 7, 2023. I spoke with USA Today national correspondent Michael Collins about her work to bring them home. Michael, thank you so much for joining me on this.
Glad to be here.
So, really important piece here. Could you just start by telling us a little bit about Alana Zaitchik and her family story?
Well, Alana lives in New York. She has been working nonstop for the last couple of years to try to help find 7 of her family members back in Israel who were abducted and held hostage by Hamas on October the 7th, 2023. These family members included 2 of her cousins, and she's really close to both of them. Her cousin's 3 daughters who were very young, the husband of one of her cousins, and the husband's brother. As I said, they were all abducted by Hamas on October the 7th, 2023. Now, about 7 weeks after they were captured, 5 of them were released. The 2 cousins and their young daughters were freed in the last week of November of that year as part of a temporary ceasefire that was announced at the time. But the husband of one of the women was not freed, and he is still in captivity. So is his brother, who was abducted at the same time. And those 2 men are among the 20 hostages that are expected to be released soon as part of this new ceasefire and hostage agreement that was brokered by the White House.
Well, Michael, you mentioned she's been fighting really over these past 2 years, essentially as a full-time job, right, to bring her family members home to free them. What specifically has she been doing, and has she had any communication with loved ones throughout this?
She has not had any communication with the 2 men who remain in captivity. No one in the family has seen them since her 2 cousins were released a couple of years ago. So what has she done? Well, she's been all over TV. She's been all over social media. Chances are people who are listening to this probably have seen her at some point. But she's really just been working to get the message out about who these people are, what has happened to them, and to make sure that the world doesn't forget about them and that the world knows that they're still held captivity. As I said, she's been all over social media and traditional media. She has met with various lawmakers. She has had to deliver petitions to the United Nations. I mean, this really has become her full-time job.
Well, Michael, we should say we're talking on October 10th. Things are changing quickly here. But when will the remaining hostages in her family, that's David and Ariel, be freed?
Well, that's a good question, and it's one we don't really know the answer to. They have been told that it could happen as soon as Monday or Tuesday. But beyond that, they really don't know anything else. Now, we do know that hospitals in Israel have been preparing to receive all of these hostages because obviously they want to check their medical condition, make sure that they're healthy, see if they developed any kind of, medical conditions while they were in captivity that needs to be taken care of. And how long they will be in the hospital really depends upon how healthy they are. And then after that, presumably, they'll finally get to come home.
After that point, Michael, I'd imagine some of this trauma will be sticking around. This is something that this family will have to process for years to come, right? What do you hear from Alana on that point?
Oh, yeah. I think Lana's whole family is preparing for that. And we're already seeing the family members that were taken hostage and have been released. We're already seeing that they still are dealing with some of the trauma. 3 of the young girls that were taken hostage, they were all very young. 2 of them were twins. They were 3 when they were abducted. They're 5 now. And so they've gone 2 years without seeing their dad. He has a twin brother who was not abducted. The twin brother looks a lot like him. So when they see him now, they sometimes think that he's their dad. And they still play the silly games that their dad taught them. They wear T-shirts that have a color photo of his smiling face. And so they're dealing with, missing their father, but they're still dealing with the trauma of what happened to them. For example, Alana told me that whenever there is a red alert siren warning in Israel, this really freaks them out. The other girl who was kidnapped and released. She was 5 when she's kidnapped. She's 7 now, and she vividly remembers what happens to her. Alana told me that she remembers the bad guys that took them away. She remembers the awful food that they had to eat. She remembers how the only water in the shower was frozen. And since they've been released, there have been times when the family has had to take refuge in a bomb shelter. That has been really, really distressing for her. Alana said she keeps asking, why did they want to kill me?
Michael Collins is a national correspondent with USA Today. Really important work here, Michael. Thanks for hopping on and discussing.
Thanks for having me.
Thousands of displaced Palestinians trekked across Gaza to return to the ruins of their abandoned homes yesterday. The returns come after a ceasefire took effect and Israeli troops began pulling back under the first phase of an agreement. The first phase of the U.S.-driven plan to halt the conflict between Israel and Hamas gave Israeli troops 24 hours to pull from positions in urban areas, though they will still hold more than half of Gaza. President Donald Trump said he would travel to the Middle East in the coming days and plans to address Israel's parliament in Jerusalem on Monday. President Donald Trump yesterday followed through on his long-standing threat to fire federal workers during the government shutdown. My colleague Dana Taylor spoke with USA Today White House correspondent Joey Garrison for the latest.
Thanks for hopping on, Joey.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
The White House says mass layoffs of federal workers have begun. How many jobs are on the line here? What do we know so far?
So Russell Vought, who's the director of the White House Office of Management and Budget, he's kind of the budget guru within the White House, announced on Friday in a very short post that rifts have begun. That means reductions in force or mass layoffs across the federal workforce. Trump had been threatening these layoffs for days and even before the government shutdown began. And this was finally an announcement that they've started. Now, we don't have an exact number on how many layoffs there have been. A OMB official told me the number is, quote, substantial. I think we can expect it into the thousands, but it's affecting multiple departments. Some of the ones that I've been able to confirm in my reporting include the Education Department, Health and Human Services, Homeland Security, as well as the Treasury Department. I believe it goes beyond that as well.
White House officials have argued layoffs are needed to ensure essential government services have the necessary funding. Who's railing against that argument?
Well, there's a lot of legal objections to that argument. First of all you have to do is look back to the more than 20 previous shutdowns we've had, and there have not been these widespread layoffs. Typically, what you have are government workers going on furlough, and they're not paid during that period. But when the shutdown's over, they return and they're still employed with the government. But this is going a step farther. And the main objections come obviously from the unions that represent the workers. They say, hey, this violates a lot of the rights of the federal employees that they have contractually as employees of the federal government. And it also violates some of the policies within these agencies as well. So before there was even the announcement Friday of the layoffs, a group of these unions already sued the Trump administration simply based on the threats that Trump had put out there.
Joy, we know that one of the main sticking points between Democrats and Republicans is health care. What has President Donald Trump said regarding his willingness to commit to extending health care subsidies? And has there been any movement on either side on the issue of health care?
Now, there's not really been any movement yet at all from Republicans agreeing to that demand. What Republicans have said is, look, you guys help us pass a bill to fund the government, and then we will negotiate healthcare policy, these Obamacare subsidies that are going to be expiring at the end of the year. We'll talk about that later and try to address before the end of the year. Now, Trump this week really went on quite a roller coaster in terms of his position on this issue. Earlier in the week, he suggested he was open to negotiating with Democrats the idea of extending the expiring subsidies as part of a package to reopen the government. In fact, he said he was already negotiating with Democrats on it. But as the week progressed, he started kind of pushing back on Democrats for holding this out. He even started making this case that Republicans are the party of health care. And as we end the week here, it's unclear. He's definitely non-committal about even supporting extending these healthcare subsidies. So really not a lot of progress. And I think ultimately, though, it's going to require Trump in some capacity to negotiate something with Democrats as opposed to it just being between Republicans and Democrats in Congress.
Democratic Senate leader Chuck Schumer is taking heat from the GOP for comments he made as the shutdown drags on. What did he say here, Joey, and how have Republicans responded?
So Schumer, in a comment to a news publication, said, quote, "Every day gets better as this shutdown continues." And what he was referring to is the political position of Democrats. Democrats are banking on the idea that Americans are going to say, hey, look, the White House has a Republican president and the Senate and House both controlled by Republicans. This is Republicans' shutdown. And so that's what he meant by those comments. Republicans in the Senate and House both seized on those comments, say, look, this shows that Democrats are seeing this as a political game. And us Republicans, we're the ones who are wanting to make sure everyone's getting their paychecks and keeping the government open. But it's Democrats who are trying to get something out of this.
And what will you be watching out for in the coming week, Joey?
Yeah, and I mean, in the coming days, we're just going to continue to see whether some sort of deal can be struck. And I think the most logical thing for there to be some sort of compromise is regarding those healthcare subsidies.
All right, Joey Garrison covers the White House for USA Today. Thank you, Joey.
All right, thanks for having me on.
Trump yesterday said the U.S. will add an additional 100% tariff on all Chinese imports in retaliation to new export controls Beijing is planning for valuable rare earth minerals. The move reignites a trade war between the world's two largest economies after the U.S. and China had for months maintained a truce that has kept tariffs on each other flat. Trump said the new tariff would go into effect on November 1st. You can read more with a link in today's show notes. 19 people are unaccounted for after an explosion yesterday at an explosive manufacturing plant in Tennessee. The Humphreys County Sheriff initially said some people had died in the blast, later telling reporters that 19 people were missing. The cause of the explosion was not immediately clear. We do know that the facility had previously committed several safety violations that left multiple employees with symptoms, including seizures, according to a report from the Tennessee Department of Labor and Workforce Development obtained by the Tennessean, part of the USA Today network. The Las Vegas Aces have cemented themselves as one of the WNBA's dynasties. They won their third championship in 4 years last night after a sweep of the Phoenix Mercury. And as our own Nancy Armour writes, they do so at a time when the level of play in the league has never been higher. She wonders if the Aces might be the best team ever. You can read more of that take and a closer look at the Aces' latest run with a link in today's show notes. Well, it was a playoff baseball night to remember. The Mariners took down the Tigers in 15 innings last night to advance to their first American League Championship Series since 2001. They'll take on the Blue Jays starting tomorrow, with the winner headed to the World Series. And on the National League side, the Cubs and Brewers will play a decisive game tonight, with the winner set to take on the Dodgers in the National League Championship Series. As always, you can follow along with USA Today Sports. And today is National Coming Out Day, a time to bring attention and support to members of the LGBTQ+ community and the many ways they choose to share their identities with the world. Thanks for listening to The Excerpt. You can get the podcast wherever you get your audio. And as always, you can find us on email at podcasts@usatoday.com. My colleague Dana Taylor is in tomorrow, and I'll be back Monday with more of The Excerpt from USA Today.